Hello and welcome to a special edition of my On The Go podcast. It's not actually part of the series, but in the last podcast I promised I would do one giving my thoughts on the latest WWE pay-per-view, the Elimination Chamber. That's right, this podcast is going to be about professional wrestling. I do apologize if that's not your cup of tea, but I love it. It's one of my passions. I'm going to be doing these going forward quite infrequently, just giving my thoughts on the latest developments, particularly in WWE, because that's the main one I follow. So we had the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view. It was obviously headlined by the Elimination Chamber match for the World Heavyweight Championship. But we'll start on the undercard, the pre-show. Mojo Rawley versus Curt Hawkins. Now, I didn't actually know about this match going into the pay-per-view, and having read the summary of why this match was taking place, I think the storyline feels a bit forced. And I think it's because it has nothing to do with wrestling. It stems from Curt Hawkins talking trash about Mojo Rawley's friend, who's a professional football player. Of course, Mojo Rawley used to be a football player, and then he became a professional wrestler. But Curt Hawkins found out about him being friends with a professional football player and began mocking him for it. Not very solid basis for a match. But I think they both carried the match very well. It was nice to see Mojo Rawley get the victory. My concern was that this match is just a filler for Mojo Rawley until his tag team partner Zack Ryder comes back from injury. They won a #1 contenders match for the tag team titles, but they never got that opportunity because during that match, Zack Ryder injured his knee and had to go have surgery. So my concern is that Mojo Rawley is just being put in these random matches until Zack Ryder comes back. I'm interested to see where Mojo Rawley goes from here. On the side of Curt Hawkins, I don't know why he came back to WWE. It's the same as Jinder Mahal. Since they've come back, they haven't been used in a significant way. I think that maybe they are helping the youngsters learn how to cope on the main roster. They've obviously been there before, and they can offer some insight and guidance. And I think that is what was happening with Mojo Rawley and Curt Hawkins. So that was the pre-show, not very inspiring. But then we got to the main card, and the first match was Mickie James, another veteran, versus Becky Lynch. This came about because Mickie James cost Becky Lynch the chance to win the Women's Championship against Alexa Bliss. So it's kind of a grudge match. It has a bit of a personal feel to it, which I like. And I like the fact that the match wasn't won with a finisher. Becky Lynch won with a roll-up. And I think that more matches need to have these surprise endings. You know, you hit the finisher and then you win the match. That isn't very surprising. So a nice surprise roll-up time and again, it helps build the surprise. Again, I think it's a case of a veteran helping out a youngster to learn how to cope on the main roster and how to give her full. And I think Mickie James is the perfect person for the women's division to learn from because she's been there, she's done that, and she has a wealth of knowledge, which I think the divas, sorry, not the divas, they're not called divas anymore, which the women's division needs to tap into. So, good for Becky Lynch getting the victory. The next match, Dolph Ziggler versus Apollo Crews and Kalisto in a handicap match. I felt that the build-up to this match was absolutely fabulous. It was very personal. In the weeks leading up to the pay-per-view, Dolph Ziggler kept attacking and assaulting Kalisto and Apollo Crews on various occasions. The storyline was that Dolph Ziggler has been frustrated with his position on the card, and he kept losing more matches, so he kept becoming more frustrated, and then eventually he snapped, and he took his frustration out on Kalisto with a steel chair. He then assaulted Apollo Crews with the steel chair, which led to this handicap match. And I thought it was great storytelling in the match itself, that they took Kalisto out while he was making his entrance. So Dolph Ziggler ambushed him, assaulted him, and it essentially turned into a one-on-one match between Dolph Ziggler and Apollo Crews, evening the odds for Dolph Ziggler. And inevitably, Kalisto came back, and he hobbled his way down to the ring, and the good guys, Apollo Crews and Kalisto, prevailed over the bad guy, Dolph Ziggler. And I like the storytelling after the match, where Dolph Ziggler again showed his frustration, and he took it out on Kalisto, and then he assaulted Apollo Crews with a steel chair, wrapping his ankle in it and breaking it. In kayfabe, breaking it. Kayfabe means he didn't actually do it, it's what is portrayed in the storyline. My concern with Dolph Ziggler is that he has the talent to be a main level superstar, but he's sitting in a mid-card feud with Kalisto and Apollo Crews. What is next for Dolph Ziggler? I hope he gets to the main event level status that he deserves, but it was a nice filler feud for him, and it was nice to see Apollo Crews and certainly Kalisto back on pay-per-view. The next match I touched on in my last podcast, but I'd like to elaborate a bit more. It was the Tag Team Turmoil match, where American Alpha, Jason Jordan and Chad Gable were defending their titles against every single tag team on the SmackDown roster. And I felt that the storytelling in this match was fantastic. You started off with Heath Slater and Rhino, the inaugural tag team champions, taking on Breezango, which is Fandango and Tyler Breeze. Tyler Breeze and Fandango are not being used very well, but they are in a storyline tag team together, so I suppose that is something. Heath Slater and Rhino prevailed, and then the Vaudevillains came out, and Heath Slater and Rhino prevailed over them as well. So it was a nice little mini push for Heath Slater and Rhino, beating two teams before they were upset by the team who came out next, the Usos. The Usos, I think, I didn't like them at the very beginning, but now I've really grown to like them. I think they are good ring workers. I think they tell good stories in the ring, and they got a win over Heath Slater and Rhino, which then led to the defending tag team champions Jason Jordan and Chad Gable coming out. Now, they had the opportunity to surprise here by having the Usos eliminate the defending tag team champions. They didn't. American Alpha prevailed. But they did tease a title change because they had the Usos beating down Jordan and Gable after they were eliminated. The Ascension, the last team to enter, then came out, and they hit their finisher, Fall of Man, and it looked like we were about to have new tag team champions. American Alpha survived, and then they prevailed, ultimately winning the match. As I said in my last podcast, it shows the faith that WWE has in this young team, that they made them survive Tag Team Turmoil, a very difficult match where they could have given the titles to any team they wanted, particularly the Ascension, who came out last. I really loved the Uso beatdown after they were eliminated, and the teasing that we would now have new tag team champions. I feel sorry for the Ascension. They've been called up to the main roster, and since they've been up, they haven't done anything. They've almost been the whipping boys of the tag team division. I would have loved to have seen the Ascension win the tag titles, but I'm also happy for Jordan and Gable retaining. As I said, it's the faith in this young team. We then had another women's match, and I think that this was the best build-up to a match on the entire card. You had Natalya versus Nikki Bella. How personal has this rivalry been? I think it's been driven mostly by Natalya in terms of talking the promos that they've cut, and in terms of the assaults that have happened. Natalya has really been the driving force behind this feud. Taking nothing away from Nikki Bella, but that last promo by Natalya before the pay-per-view, absolutely fantastic. And it's about time we saw a real personal rivalry again. Now, back to my earlier point where the Mojo Rawley-Kurt Hawkins story doesn't seem legit because it has nothing to do with wrestling. This does have to do with wrestling because Natalya is talking about John Cena, who's Nikki Bella's fiancé, I think, or boyfriend, and dissing him and saying Nikki Bella wouldn't be where she is today if it wasn't for John Cena. Very personal. And the intensity that these two are bringing into their matches, amazing. Absolutely amazing. I don't know about the match finish. That was my problem with this match, because you had them brawling on the outside, they're ignoring the referee's count, they both get counted out. It doesn't lead to any resolution, there's no closure. And maybe that's a good thing because we will have a payoff further down the line. In fact, I now expect that. But I thought we were going to pay off the story in this pay-per-view. But high intensity, very personal, great storytelling, and Natalya underused. I'm sorry, she should be in a much better position. She should be women's champion. That's how talented she is. The next match was a bit inevitable, and I felt that that took away from it. It was Randy Orton versus Luke Harper. This came about after Randy Orton joined the Wyatt family, and ended up causing Bray to turn on Luke Harper. Randy Orton also won the Royal Rumble match, and I felt that that was why this match was inevitable. It was inevitable that Randy Orton was going to win because you have to protect the Royal Rumble winner. You can't have him being upset by Luke Harper, who, although he's a talented wrestler, is not at that stage, the main event stage. It would have been great if Luke Harper had won, but it was inevitable that Randy Orton would win. And from what I saw, the match didn't look that great, actually. They were quite sluggish at the beginning. They picked it up towards the end, but it looked really bad at the beginning. Next up on the card, we crowned a new women's champion as Naomi beat Alexa Bliss. It was great to see 3 women's matches on the card. That's how much importance they're placing on the women's division now. Before, it was merely one match which lasted 2 minutes, didn't contain any actual wrestling. It was about looking at the women's good figures. Now we have actual wrestling, we have proper storylines, and we have a new women's champion. And as I said in my podcast yesterday, Naomi, what a great wrestler. She's so talented. And again, I think it's about damn time that she won a championship. I'm very interested to see who her next challenger is going to be. Are we going to go with Alexa Bliss having a rematch? Maybe Mickie James is now wanting a shot. Becky Lynch is always in the mix because she wants that title again. We'll have to wait and see who challenges Naomi. But I hope Naomi holds the title for a while. It'll be interesting to see whether the champions can get to WrestleMania still with their titles. Both the women's champion, the tag team titles, and now I'm going to be talking about the main event. The main event was the Elimination Chamber. Probably the most noticeable thing about the Elimination Chamber itself was that they've changed the structure of it. Not in terms of the way it is run, but in terms of the way it looks. I like the new look Elimination Chamber, but the one element which I think everyone was focusing on was that the metal grids on the outside, they've replaced them with, it looks like padding. Now, they obviously want to protect the wrestlers, but I think it takes away from the impact of moves which are done on the outside, because it's no different than doing moves on the floor, so they're just doing them onto pads. Yes, it led to some really nice high spots in the chamber match, but I felt that when you crash onto that steel grating, that was impact. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be upset about them changing that aspect of the chamber, but I understand it. It's to protect the wrestlers themselves. The Elimination Chamber, 6 superstars battling to win the World Heavyweight Championship. The defending champion, John Cena. I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not a huge fan of John Cena currently. You have to respect his work ethic, and you have to respect his commitment to the WWE. But at the same time, he's been shoved down our throats far too much. I'm so over John Cena. I'm happy that he equaled Ric Flair's record, but at the same time, he must now just go away. And if the plans are to be believed, he won't feature in the title match at WrestleMania, which I think is a welcome relief. But in the Elimination Chamber, we had John Cena, AJ Styles, The Miz, Baron Corbin, Bray Wyatt, and Dean Ambrose. It was AJ Styles who started things out with John Cena, and all 6 superstars entered the match before any of them were eliminated. The first to go was Baron Corbin, and I'm not surprised by that. If you had to ask me who was the least likely to win the Elimination Chamber, I would say Baron Corbin. I like how WWE is trying to push him as a main event level threat, and they've done a beautiful job of building him up. But if he had won the Elimination Chamber, or at least survived past the first 2 eliminations, I would have been very surprised. So it doesn't surprise me that Baron Corbin was eliminated first, and it doesn't surprise me who was eliminated next, which was Dean Ambrose. Now, I think that I'm interested to see what position Dean Ambrose holds on the WrestleMania card. He is, of course, the Intercontinental Champion, but it came as no surprise that he was eliminated from the chamber, because again, if you had to ask me which superstar was the least likely to win it, I would have said Baron Corbin and then Dean Ambrose. The next superstar to go was The Miz. I think he gave a solid performance, as he always does, but again, not a surprise to me, because again, I wouldn't have put The Miz winning it or being in the top 3. So it was a bit predictable up until this point. Then the big shock came. John Cena was eliminated. This is a guaranteed new World Heavyweight Champion. And I've read some spoilers before the show. I visited the dirt sheets online, and they said that John Cena would not win the championship. Well, not retain it at Elimination Chamber, and that proved to be true. And in fact, the dirt sheet said who the winner was going to be, and it was the truth. So Cena was eliminated. We're left with AJ Styles and Bray Wyatt. I'm so happy that AJ Styles is in WWE. I've always been a fan of his work, and it's really nice to see that he's now getting big crowds, big recognition. He's a main event player on SmackDown. So happy for him. Bray Wyatt, underused for so long, and ultimately Bray Wyatt won the match. He is the new World Heavyweight Champion. Again, it's about damn time. I've advocated for Bray to be champion for a very long time now. I think he is a fantastic performer. I think he tells stories very well. As I mentioned earlier, it's now going to be interesting to see whether he can stay champion until WrestleMania. But then it sets up a very interesting clash if he does make it to WrestleMania as champion, because then we have Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton, who are in a storyline together as family. Every man for himself, I suppose. And ultimately, I hope Bray prevails at WrestleMania if the match is indeed Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton. The one problem I have with WWE nowadays is that championships change hands far too much. They need to hold championships for a lot longer. They did it well with the New Day when they held the tag team titles on Raw. They broke a record for the longest reigning tag team in the history of WWE, and I think more titles need to be held for longer. Even the Women's Championship on SmackDown, it keeps changing hands. They need to give them longer reigns, but not too long. I was happy that New Day broke the record, but at the end of the day, I wanted them to lose it because I was sick and tired of New Day. And speaking of New Day, this has nothing to do with the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, but I just wanted to add my thoughts. I don't think they know what they're doing with New Day now, because now that they've lost the tag team titles, they're just floating around on Raw in a completely random storyline, no real direction. Maybe they should break up the team, maybe they should all go their separate ways. But then what would you do with 3 wrestlers? If they can't have a storyline for one team, how are they going to have storylines for 3 wrestlers? But overall, I thought Elimination Chamber was a good pay-per-view. I would actually give it 8 out of 10. I feel that the builds to the matches were solid. I felt that the presentation was solid, apart from the Randy Orton-Luke Harper match, which I felt was a bit sluggish. I don't think they work very well together. But good matches, some surprises. Great that Bray Wyatt won the World Heavyweight Championship. Great that Naomi finally won the Women's Championship. Tag team titles, so happy for American Alpha that they retained. It's looking good for SmackDown. Before I go, I'd just like to share my thoughts on a couple of the big things that happened on Raw. I know it's a different brand, but some really significant developments. We have a new Women's Champion on Raw. Bayley beat Charlotte Flair with help from Sasha Banks. I think the fact that she was helped by Sasha Banks kind of takes away from it a little bit. But again, I'm so happy for Bayley. The youngsters are getting a chance to shine, and now she must shine and hold that championship for quite a while. I don't want to see it change hands anytime soon. We also had Kevin Owens turning on his best friend, now former best friend I suppose, Chris Jericho. He assaulted him since Jericho put Kevin Owens in a match with Goldberg at the next pay-per-view. Now, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm still trying to process that, because if Goldberg wins, the plan that I've read about is to have Goldberg defend the championship, the Universal title, against Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. 2 part-timers on the biggest show of them all, when Raw has so many talented individuals. I don't know about that. We'll have to wait and see how that pans out. But so far, very happy with WWE at the moment. I go through phases. My wife describes it as an abusive relationship. So 1 minute I'm going, oh, WWE is absolutely amazing, can't get enough of them. And then we go to a stage where I go, oh, WWE, I hate you so much, I'm never watching you ever again. And then they do things which are great, and I go, oh, WWE, I'm back, this is great. So you keep coming back to this abusive relationship. But I suppose that's the unpredictability that makes professional wrestling so much fun. those are my thoughts on the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view. If you'd like to share your thoughts with me, you can follow me on Twitter at MichaelBratt8. I would love to hear from you. You can drop me an email, bratt.michael@gmail.com. Let's talk wrestling. I love professional wrestling. I hope you do too. I'll do this more in future. But until the next On The Go podcast, it's goodbye from me.